It was late February and something was wrong. My sister-in-law was rushed to the hospital in full-blown labor, yet she wasn't due until June. Once there, they told her that the baby had a 20% chance of survival. My name is Jennifer Mitchell-Early. I help individuals and teams achieve organizational and personal success, and this is Leadership Matters. When I first saw him, he could fit into the palm of my hand. His head was the size of an egg, and he had hair all over his body. As the doctor explained his health challenges and prognosis, my brother subconsciously tried to smooth out his ears. They were folded down as they needed cartilage that had yet to form to hold them erect on his head. The doctor gently placed his hand over my brother's to still his smoothing, reassuring him that in time, the cartilage would develop and his son's ears would look just like ours. Needless to say, we spent a lot of time praying during my nephew's 4-month stay in the neonatal intensive care unit. He was so small that full-term babies looked like giants. Through the highs and lows of his development, the feeding tube, scary surgeries that threatened his vision, to the general stress that preemies endure from being poked and prodded from entering this world too soon, we were faced with the question, whose report will you believe? Jonathan Nkosi Mitchell is now a healthy, happy, successful 24-year-old firefighter paramedic. He has no long-term issues resulting from his premature birth. He is our miracle baby. So many times in my life, I've been faced with what appears to be insurmountable odds. Each time, I have to answer the question, whose report will I believe? The book of Numbers tells of the Israelites' long stay in the desert as they journeyed from Mount Sinai to the plains of Moab. As you may recall, this journey took 40 years, a period in which the generation that originally left Egypt died off. The book of Numbers details the Israelites' preparation for military conquest of the Promised Land, God's covenant loyalty toward Israel with regard to the land, Israel's repeated failure to keep covenant with God, God's leadership of his people and affirmation of Moses' leadership, preparation for entering and worshiping in the Promised Land, and the conquest of the land east of the Jordan River. For our purposes today, I want to speak to you from the subject, whose report will you believe? In the past year, most of us have been through something that we haven't lived through before. Many of us have lost loved ones, friends, and associates. Some of us have been devastated by the personal loss of health, finances, resources, security, and the like. And still others are looking at the current state of our national disorder, lawlessness, vitriol, and violence, and believe that life as we know it is over. I have one simple question for you today. Whose report will you believe? Though I have never personally lived through a pandemic before, I have had to journey through some valleys. I believe we all have. The God Speaks and I Listen blog defines valleys as an experience or period of time where you feel alone, even though you're not, in your situation or trial. Whether physically or mentally, it's a time that is very difficult and extremely hard to work through. It's not death, but it can feel just as difficult emotionally to deal with. It can be a time where you pray and you feel as if your prayers come back stamped, return to sender. But know that the valley has its purpose. It'll help you know God's word and his promises to you. It'll help you grow spiritually, learn of God's sustaining power, expose any doubt that you may have, bring you to the next level in God, help you to reflect on your mountaintop experience and remind you of God's power, learn to patiently wait on the Lord, and ultimately allows you to see and experience victory firsthand. Psalms 23:4 says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Simply stated, even when we walk through the valley, we should believe God's report. We see these same lessons taught to the children of Israel time and time again throughout their journey as Israel pushed on towards the Promised Land. The long and tiresome journey through the wilderness of Paran was relieved by stoppages at various points where the people set up camp for a few days. As they moved nearer to Canaan, Moses sent 12 spies, one from each tribe, to see what they could find out about the country, its terrain, its people, its defenses, and its productivity. The spies probably split up, going in different directions to search out the required information. They covered the land from south to north, west to east. Meanwhile, the people had journeyed closer to Canaan and set up camp at Kadesh, in the north of the wilderness of Paran. There, the spies rejoined the camp after their 40 days fact-finding mission. In brief, their report was that the land was very fruitful, but its inhabitants were fearsome. For 10 of the spies, this observation about the local inhabitants was sufficient reason to cancel all plans for the invasion of Canaan, and they persuaded the people to agree with them. Only 2 spies, Joshua and Caleb, suggested Israel go ahead as planned and occupy the land. Numbers chapter 13 verses 25 through 33 of the NIV version read as follows. At the end of 40 days, they returned from exploring the land. They came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. There they reported to them and to the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses this account. We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here's the fruit. But the people who live there are powerful, and their cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites live in Negev, and the Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live near the sea and along the Jordan. Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, we should go up and take possession of the land for we can certainly do it. But the men who had gone up with him said, we can't attack those people. They're stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. They said, the land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. As opposed to focusing on the fact that the promised land flowed with milk and honey, which symbolized the redemption of God and his goodness, milk referring to the goat's milk, honey referring to bees, which related to fruitful pastures and fields in Canaan, the spies focused on the troubles of the land, the strength of the inhabitants, the fortification of its cities, and the immense size of the descendants of Anak. Apparently, this is a family whose stature was legendary in the ancient Middle East. The spies listed the Amalekites and others to show that the land was already inhabited. God did not promise them virgin land, but a place that was already inhabited, because God wished to displace the inhabitants because of their iniquities. Some of y'all are afraid to go in and possess the land, the job, promotion, business, whatever the thing is, because somebody's already there. Don't you think God knew that when he told you to take it? Whose report will you believe? What God has for you is for you. Caleb was the only one who knew what time it was. He urged immediate attack due to his underlying faith in God, whom he knew would fight for his people. Yet the other spies were steadfast in their bad report. They described the land as evil and those living there as giants. Their contentious description was an attack on God, the giver of the land. Following the scandalous report of the spies, the people wept that night, not for the sinful attitudes of the spies, but for the loss of a dream, their own sense that they'd made a mistake leaving Egypt. Can we be honest with each other? Have you ever regretted stepping out on faith, leaving Egypt in search of your promised land? I have, more than once. And what I love about God is his patience and his grace. God knows the end from the beginning. He knew that when he showed you the promise and you attempted to walk in it, that you would believe what you saw versus what he said. Let me let you in on a little secret. Nothing that we do surprises God or catches him off guard. If you're anything like me, God has told you a few things, and even though he's not a man that he should lie, and he always comes through, you're still a bit challenged in your faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not yet seen. It's the not yet seen for me. And I'm encouraged because it's not just me and it's not just you, it's everybody. Even the Israelites. I mean, it rained down manna and they still questioned God. God has done so much for me that I often feel silly after the fact for questioning him. I'm trying to get to a place where I know that I know that I know, like your grandmama. The thing about older seasoned saints is they've been trusting in God a long time. They actually know him. It's all about relationship. Grandma knows God like she knows you. Grandma don't care what the bill collector, doctor, politician, president, or even the preacher say. She gonna believe God. She's gonna believe his report. She's gonna stand on his record, the Bible. Whose report will you believe? Yours? What your eyes tell you or your mind? You know that's a battlefield. Your mind will definitely play tricks on you. Someone else's report, what you see on TV, read on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and the like, because you know how reputable those sources are. Your friends and your family, because you know we always agree with them. Or God. All it takes is for you to sit down and think back over your life. How many times has God come through for you? I know you thought it was Mama and them, or Pookie and them, or that kind manager, or the church, or whomever. But who do you think gave them the unction, the will, and the way? I'm going to let that marinate for a minute and ask you one last time, whose report will you believe?